to another episode of MC Fireside Chats. My name is Brian Searl with Insider Perks and Modern Campground. Excited to be here. We've got one guest today because everybody else bailed on us last minute. We're on flights at the RV Industry Power Breakfast. Didn't give us but an hour heads up. So we're just, me and Jon are going to hang out here and talk about his campground, do some interesting things, dive into some good conversations. So how you doing, Jon?
I'm doing well, Brian. It's nice to be here.
So tell me, Jon, well, briefly introduce yourself first before I ask you questions. Tell us who you are and a little bit about your resort.
Yeah, you bet. I'm Jon Thatcher. I'm the owner of Shady Oaks Camping Resort in Plattsburgh, New York. I've been an owner for almost 2 years. I purchased the resort and the campground in 2024, August of 2024. And since then, we've been deep in renovations, and I've been doing my best to kind of learn the industry and get the campground back online.
So here's where I think I want to start. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive, right? We don't normally have enough time to ask one individual guest some of the questions that maybe the industry would like to hear and know about more when they're, because there's so many people, I think, since COVID who have come into the industry who have either bought or developed or, are part of a larger organization who's acquiring campgrounds. And as a result of that, and then what we're going through with the economy, like all the things have changed and the people have changed and so it's interesting to just kind of maybe pause and do a deep dive into an owner operator, especially one who's come in with kind of a fresh perspective. Is that fair to say? I
think so. Yeah, definitely have a lot to learn, but new to the industry.
But sometimes that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
We have, you already know this or you've learned this. I don't know enough about you to say which one, right? But we are in an industry that has been dominated by really the same people for the last 30, 40 years. And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. I'm just saying it because it is what it is, or at least the same type of people who are on the associations and in KOA and on the board directors. And those are really, really smart people. They're brilliant. Nobody's saying anything bad about them, but so it's refreshing to be able to give of, my small part. And certainly there are other things that you're doing and other operators and owners like you, to give a voice to the people who have only been here 2 years, because as much as you don't know, there are things that your perspective, because you don't know those things, might be refreshing for the industry to hear, I think. But we'll find out together, right? No pressure. So, but before we get to your campground, back me up. Where does Jon come from? How does Jon get, where does Jon begin his love of camping or his direction that might have ended up resulting in buying a campground?
Yeah, that question actually relates to kind of what brought me to campground ownership also. I grew up in the Adirondacks in Ticonderoga, not far from where Shady Oaks is located. But I spent my professional career mostly in education, in the education reform sector, specifically working in charter schools. Most recently as a chief operating officer for a small charter network in the capital region of New York. I left that role. I'd been in that space for 15 plus years. I left that role at the very end of 2023, stayed on with the organization and consulted through the spring of 2024. And then all at the same time took a road trip. I was new to RVing personally, but my parents have long been RVers. They travel south in the winter. We camped as kids growing up. We had a camper. And so I went on a road trip, fell in love with the culture. I was looking for something different professionally, ready to make a big change in my life. And truthfully, was trying to get back to the Adirondacks, closer to my parents who are getting older. And it just, while I was on that road trip, I just bought a camper and bought a campground before I got back, and found Shady Oaks. Was under contract before I got back into New York.
So we hear a lot of those. I wouldn't say a lot. I've heard some of those stories before. We have some recurring guests on the show who both own individual parks and then own or manage management groups that manage 20, 40, 60 properties. And I've heard the story before of especially I think it happened quite significantly during COVID of we went on the road, we found RVing, we discovered it, we talked about it, we decided that this is a magical thing that we want. And I'm not minimizing it, I'm just wrapping up, right? Yep. And then we just decided to, we were renting an RV or whatever, and we decided to buy a campground.
Yeah.
And I always think whenever that story comes out, I'm like, damn, I wish I had enough money to buy a campground. Where do you guys get all this money? We're just like, hey, that's pocket change. But I know it's harder than that, right?
Yeah.
But I'm curious, let's back up to your childhood of camping with your parents for a second, right? Do you think that you would have ever been as interested in purchasing a campground if you didn't have that experience of growing up camping?
Yeah, definitely not. I think there was something familiar when I got back out there in my own RV, like something that, nostalgic, that reminded me of experiences that I had as a kid, and the spaces that we visit that felt like a community. Like there was something always happening at a campground. Even I grew up in a tourist town on Lake George. Ticonderoga is right on the north shore of Lake George, uh, and the population of the town probably quadruples in the summertime because people visit. There's a campground just down the road from where I grew up. I was always sort of like interested in what was happening there because there was always there was a lot happening there. You could smell the campfires as you drive by on the highway. So I don't think I would have been interested in it if I didn't feel some sort of connection to it, to what I witnessed and experienced growing up.
It's it's interesting to me because we've done, like, my company, Insider Perks, we do lots of stuff, but one of the things we started doing recently is industry research reports and looking at, like, pricing data, and we released in, I think it was December of last year, maybe January, we released a report on Gen Z and how they approached camping and how they viewed it and how they were maybe a little bit less involved in camping out of the box than, for example, your parents might be or your
Yeah.
generation might be, or older millennials. We find that's kind of the cutoff, right? Like I think I'm
Yeah.
like barely a millennial by like 1 year or 2 years.
Mhm.
So, um, but it's interesting to me. Like I think that what you're saying led you to ownership of a campground is the same thing that is something that should concern the industry. And I'm curious if you agree
Mhm.
with me, because I think that there are a whole lot of, and there are certainly exceptions to this. Like we were talking to, can't remember. I think it wasn't Erica. I can't remember. Ashley, I think, was the chair of the Arvik, Ojai Young Professionals. I kept calling it Arvik. That was their name a
Mhm.
couple years ago, before they rebranded. And she was on the show, and I asked her the same question. We were talking about the Gen Z report and how I said, you are actively involved in camping. I don't know if it was her specifically, right? But I talked to too many people, and I'm old. But you, you grew up on a campground. You were in a generational camping experience. Your parents
Mhm.
either owned it or you had, like you said, you camped when you were a kid. You
Yeah.
had that outdoor experience. You had the love of camping and RVing and tenting or whatever, right? Being outside, being connected to nature, which is something that generally in our American Western population, maybe
Yeah.
even globally, probably seems to have declined
Sure.
in the last, let's call it 20 years ish, maybe really 2010, 2011 with the advent of social media. And I think that is because we are no longer, this is my theory, and I'm very unscientific, so you can tell me if I'm crazy or not, right? Because we are no longer bored.
Mhm.
We no longer sit outside on the porch of the cabin or whatever and have nothing to do. So we
Yes.
don't listen to the birds and we don't
Mhm.
notice the trees and we don't see the fish or the osprey or if we ever have a second of random boredom, we pull out our phones and we're not bored anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that is, if we're not careful,
Yep.
going to potentially contribute to the decline of the appreciation of the outdoor hospitality industry. I think
Yeah.
there are other people that will come in through cabins and glampings that will probably make it fine, but
Mhm.
I'm curious about your take on that.
Yeah, I can see the risk that you're describing. I think is real. I think the optimist in me wants to think that's also the argument to build more campgrounds. There's
Yeah.
an opportunity there to sort of broaden the appeal, or I guess depending on how you look at it, narrow, and
Mhm.
remind people of what's out there and what is the great thing about uh, joining a community at a campground, whether it's as a seasonal camper or out on the road. Because I think, to be honest, that's sort of what blew me away. I camped as a kid, but not as an adult. And I don't even, to be honest, I don't really, I'm an owner of a campground. I don't consider myself a camper. I RV to travel. I'm a full timer. I go south in the winter. I still hit the road. I get into as many campgrounds as I can to just get more ideas to bring back to my own campground. Um, and I think what I've been blown away by is the people who are out there kind of looking for the same thing as me, like that are, there's a community of people whether they're at Shady Oaks in Plattsburgh or any campground across the country. I can find something in common with anybody I meet because we RV and because we're out on the road camping.
Yeah. So then the question becomes like, how do we? I think the answer to your question is partially correct. Like what you're saying is part of the problem. It's correct, and that building more campgrounds, building more experiences is the way to provide something that enables those people to discover the outdoors.
Yeah.
Whether that's glamping as a glamping only resort, whether that's tents, whether that's RVing,
Right.
whether that's something that is still coming with Marriott and who knows what else they're going to build, right? But the question is like what we found in the Gen Z report is that most of these Generation Z and Generation A, and it's not really defined by generation, younger millennials,
Yeah.
right? But this age range that has been heavily influenced by social media, call it that, right? Helicopter parenting.
Sure.
Like I remember I used to be a kid, I used to crawl up a tree and fall out and I would twist my ankle or whatever. Like I feel like kids don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
But anyway, so that we know that based on the research, and this is from psychologists and organizations, like it's not, that report was just a white paper. It wasn't our own research, right? So this goes across industries. We know that they like the outdoors. They are interested in the outdoors. They want to get outside. But what we think they don't know how to do is how to do that.
Yeah, that
never taught
resonates.
that.
Yep.
Yeah. So
that resonates.
How do we do that?
Yeah, and part of me thinks too, there's like, in some cases, there could be an affordability component. If you look at the price of an RV today, it's a little bit, it's intimidating to think as a younger person, like, can I afford that? It feels like a luxury. It is a luxury. But then on the other side of that, one thing that we're starting to think more about is how do we get more, we just added, or I guess renovated or got back online a bunch of tent sites, and trying now to think, how do we market that to, there's a demographic of people who are looking for that. And I think we have some really nice sites now newly available for tent campers. But this question of how do we get in front of people who are looking for that, that's a different group and a different appeal and a different strategy than what I think we try to employ for our typical RV campers.
I think your economic thing is spot on. I want to set that aside just for a second, and we'll come back to that, right? Because it is an important thing. I think that what we found in that white paper, and again, I'm just reinforcing that I'm old and forget things, and it's been like 4 months since we released it, right? But generally, what I think we found in there is that there's just a nervousness. There's a, because of social media and all the intangibles and the fact that any mistake that you make now lives online forever, potentially shot by your friend or somebody that is trying to bully you or whatever else.
Right.
There's this fear of, if I go outside, I don't know how to pitch a tent. I don't know how to get rid of bugs. I don't know how to be comfortable. I don't know how to whatever. And it feels like our industry is just assuming that what they want is Wi-Fi or whatever tech. And we are assuming that they have the same knowledge that we had or that our boomer parents had, and that they grew up noticing the things that they didn't grow up noticing.
Yeah.
And so that the only missing gap then is just marketing to them, when in reality, it's how do I ease their fear about coming outside? So I think that's the first piece of it that I'm curious to hear your take on. I know I'm making you a psychologist. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do my best, but yeah, take it with a grain of salt.
We can do a psychiatrist too if you have drugs. I don't know.
No, but I think that's a really interesting. It's something I hadn't considered, right? Like, because I think from the narrow perspective I have and like the limited space of like, how do we, get more people to visit our campground? I have to this point thought of it as a marketing problem, but maybe there's a bigger, what I like about it is it changes my definition of what's sort of the gap here, and puts a lot more on our plate as an organization, as a business to try to find a solution. And I would say anecdotally, there's some like early day, like one of the things we did right off the bat was we not only do we have full hookup RV sites and seasonal camping, overnight camping, all that stuff. We have as I mentioned before, tent sites, and we have a glamping tent. And sort of the big picture thinking there from a business model perspective was we have to make this as accessible as possible, and people want different things. And what our mission is to like build a community, and how people access that is going to be different, right? But there's like there's core events, there's core functions, there's core things that doesn't matter if you're staying in a tent or staying in an RV, or you're here for the season, or you're in one of our glamping tents. You can have we're all going to share, whether it's live music or whatever that event
experience
is. But yeah, exactly. So I hadn't considered that there's more than just like apprehension about our product holding people back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think many people have, and I don't mean, like, I realize I'm walking a kind of fine line here, and I don't want anybody who's listening to the show to say that it's your fault or you should have considered this, or I figured it out so I'm smarter than you. That's not what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
I think it's similar to, like, you grew up in a camping environment. If they grew up in their generational environment with their parents or whatever, or if they went camping or they went RVing, like, it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of, like, I'm a campground owner. I have kids. My kids have always been outside because I'm a campground owner. What do you mean Gen Z doesn't like to go outdoor? What are you talking? Look at my kid who's right next door to me, right? And so it's hard to disconnect when you've never been exposed to what I think the majority of Gen Z is in cities.
Right. Yeah, hard to, and also hard to sort of imagine what that's, the perspective that they have, or people don't know what they don't know, right? So
I don't know a lot.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
And so, how do we, it feels like an access issue through that lens a little bit. Like, how do we broaden? And this comes back to, I think, your original point. It's like there's some concerns here that maybe the industry should have about sort of growing the pie, so to speak. How do we get more people to see the appeal of the business, of this, I don't want to call it a business, but of the industry, of the experiences that people have while they're camping.
Right, because it's not a hard sell. Like, once you, and I'm guilty of this too. Like, I'm what you would call, like, if it even exists, a Zennial. I learned that on YouTube a few months ago, right? That weird middle ground between, I think, Gen X and Millennial or whatever.
Okay. Yep.
And so they call us this, at least according to a YouTube video that's probably just as equally unscientific as all the things I'm citing, was basically like, we started our lives. So I was born in 1982, right? I'm 44.
Yep.
We started our lives without the technology, and then we got introduced to the technology. Right. So we had the benefit, I guess, or the curse, or whatever way you want to look at it,
right,
of
seeing both worlds,
both sides of the coin, right?
Yep.
And so I think it's interesting to step back and look at it from that perspective of, like, as I've looked at my own life and reassessed some of this stuff, because I've been building a business for 15 years, working 100 hours a week because I love what I do. But I've stepped back and realized, as I've started to finally go on more vacations, because I've had a girlfriend for 5 years now, and I need to do that. Apparently, I can't just lock myself in the office. But as I've started to do this, I've realized, like, I've said this on the show before, I think, but I took a vacation to Vancouver Island. I live in Calgary, Canada. I took a vacation to Vancouver, and we were walking along. My girlfriend and I were just walking along a beach in Vancouver Island, and I realized at the end of that walk, like, because I was worrying about a client who was complaining about their website that something wasn't done on time, even though I have 30 people who are working there. They just they want me on vacation, right?
Yep.
And I started to realize, like, I'm not even appreciating the ocean, the beach that I'm walking along. Like, it's completely abandoned. It's beautiful. And so I started trying to reframe my thinking around there. And I just I was in Key West for vacation for a couple of weeks, but for 3 days, we stayed after the Florida Alabama Campground Conference. We stayed on what was really glamping, a houseboat.
Yep.
It was like, it was a catamaran. A guy tore down, like, the whole catamaran and then built a cottage on top of it and moored it off of the, like, not in a marina, but 10 minutes away in the 4-foot water of Key West. So you have to take a boat to get to it. And once you're out there, once they leave you and they take, you're out there. You're on a catamaran, and you're not, like, you could call them in an emergency, right? But unless you want to swim, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so there's no Wi-Fi out there, and I could turn on my phone, right? But then you sit there and you see the Osprey and the waves, and, like, my girlfriend and I would sit out on that. I had a little wraparound deck he built around this catamaran, right? And we would sit there and point the flashlight in the water at night, and all the minnows would come, and you just look at the fish, and try to see like, the little ones would come and then the big ones would come
Awesome.
and then they would eat and so it just, those things are what you don't pay attention to. Those things are what, and I think I've assessed that and been able to kind of understand how I would imagine
Hmm.
Gen Z feels about the outdoors. If they sat there with a flashlight and saw the fish,
Right.
some people would be like, "That's gross. I never want to do that again. Ew, bugs, whatever," right? But I think the majority of people, 60, 70% of people would be
Yeah.
like, "Sure, I could maybe not look at the fish, maybe that's not my thing, but I could look at the osprey, or I could look at the waves, or I could sit on the beach, or I could look at the trees, or sit by the river, or take a float trip, or do something in the outdoors
Yeah.
that brings me closer to nature." It's an easy selling point is what I'm trying to say. What we have to
Yeah.
figure out is like, how do I tell Gen Z and Gen A and everybody who's coming after them that this is something that is vital to their appreciation of the world around them.
Sure. There's like an exposure gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's hard because they want to be outdoors, but they don't know how to do it. So how do you bring them into a campground when the marketing that you're pushing out, not you
Hmm.
specifically, right, but generally as an industry at a macro level, just says the same thing it's always said: come camping with us. We have full hookups, we have tent sites, we have whatever else.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell the story of the experience. And even if it did, the experience in many places, at least I haven't found one yet, is not specifically tailored toward Gen Z and that problem.
Yeah. And what do you think that could look like? Because I like this idea of,
Like
yeah.
one example I remember from the report, and you can download it on our website. It's on
Okay.
insiderperks.com. It's a free report. Like you just got to pop in your email or whatever, right? One example I remember from the report is it. We suggested like lanterns, so like
Mm.
colored lanterns, because there are some Gen Z who are shy and disconnected and not as social
Hmm.
as, for example, we are or your parents are or whatever else, right? Because of that disconnection of social media. And so there are some who are interested probably in going camping who don't want to talk to anybody when they go camping.
Yeah.
They want to be disconnected. They want to be left alone. They want nothing to do with anybody, right? This is the same type of thing you've seen with like I don't want to talk to anybody when I check in. Just like the boomers want to
Yeah.
chat with people.
Oh
They want
yeah.
to have that
Yeah.
conversation, right?
Yeah.
But the younger generations, I just want to get to my site. Like, I don't want to talk to you for 10 minutes about rules and everything else, right? Let me get to my
Right.
site.
Right.
Um, so I think there's some people like that, but then I think there's other people who, and maybe there's an overlap, like where one person is like, okay, Tuesdays I want to do this, and Wednesdays I want to do this, or today's the day I want to be social or not. So there's some overlap, right? But then there's the other people who are like, I do want to go meet people because I'm having trouble to doing this in real
Hmm.
life, and I understand. Well, maybe I don't understand, but I'm slowly starting to learn because of the marketing that the outdoor hospitality industry is hopefully giving me, or the campground is hopefully giving me. I'm starting to slowly realize how much of a community potentially, or a lower barrier it is potentially at a campground to meeting other like-minded individuals such as myself.
Yeah.
And then like I need to have a way to do that. So the idea that I think AI actually came up with it, right? But the idea was is the green lanterns, like buy some lanterns from the store,
Yep.
put some either green paint on them or green tape. I can't remember what it said, right? Green paint, and hand them to the people when they come in and say like, if you want to be social, turn your light on to green, and everybody
I
who
see.
walks by you will know that you want to be social. And if it's off, they don't approach you.
Yeah. I mean,
So stuff like that,
that's
right?
interesting. Yeah. I mean, what it makes me also want to say is like we, and maybe this has been done already, but I think it's an interesting question. And how do we involve Gen Z in getting to an answer for that question? Right? Like, are there opportunities to survey? Are there opportunities to do focus groups? I think, 'cause, part of me also wonders if there's differences in by region. And
Mhm.
I'm in the North Country region of New York, which there's, and I hesitate to figure out the right words to describe what I think is different about the North Country. But there
We're all
is,
guessing here, so feel free to guess.
yeah, it makes me wonder if the demographic data that you're describing is true in the same ways in the North Country.
I don't think so. Like, I think it's different. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's probably close because social media has such a reach into our
Yes.
society.
Yep.
But I think, and you can tell me if this is along the lines of your thinking, right? And I don't, like, I've probably driven through the what cities does it include?
Uh, there's some debate
Close.
about that, but I say anything kind of north of like Saratoga.
Okay.
Of New
So
York.
like I've been I've been to Buffalo frequently. My parents
Yeah.
actually live in New York. They live in Olean, New York,
Okay.
in the middle of nowhere, really. Although
Yeah.
Olean's, I guess, a
What's it?
city.
What's it close? Is that close? Is that Western New York?
Yeah, Western New York. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm like thinking sort of the eastern side, Vermont border, I guess Watertown, that sort of the northernmost, not Western New York, not Rochester, Buffalo, but like above Syracuse and
okay.
Albany.
But I wonder if it's and tell me if this is different, because like I've been to Syracuse, I've driven up. That's where you go up to like
Yep.
Montreal, right?
Yeah.
Border. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Again, not super intimately familiar with that area, right? Like you
Mhm.
are, but what I'm imagining is that there's probably a difference in the way, just like there's a difference in the way a Gen Z or Gen A or younger millennial, whatever, would perceive camping if they had grown up camping. I
Mhm.
think there's probably a difference in how Gen Z perceives the outdoors if they grew up in New York City versus the
For
North
sure.
Country.
Yeah, for
Is
sure.
that where you're going?
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm going. And well, one, it's like I look back at my own childhood, which again, I'm not that far behind. I was born in 1985. So sort of spanned that gap too of like before technology and after technology. We spent a lot of time outside. I still think to a degree that's greater than elsewhere, that's still true here. Kids are more likely to spend time outside in small towns in upstate New York, for example, than maybe, certainly than New York City, right?
Yep.
And I also agree with your second point that like the social media it reaches the North Country too. Um, it makes me want to get more data of like who are around our clientele, who are our guests, and kind of think differently about like who are we trying to target and how do we um, sort of broaden our market a little bit.
Yeah, I think that the problem with surveying, I think, and again, I have not seen anybody do a really good survey of this. Maybe
Yeah.
Scott Barr could help us with that. He's on a podcast with me, actually live in 45 minutes when this ends. But he does KOA's North American Camping Report, is the data guy behind all that stuff. If you've ever seen that report, and if you haven't, you should go download it. Yeah, it's really good. But he, maybe he can do some research into Gen Zs and stuff like that, because I think that the limited data set that I'm assuming most of the industry is working on is we've got a lot of Gen Zs already in the camping industry. Let's ask them.
Yeah,
Their
true.
perception is not, that's the, like their perception is like, well, I just want Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Because they already appreciate the outdoors and they've already grown up in it, right? And so I think we need to figure out a way to get a perception from people who specifically say like, I've never been camping.
Yep. Right. And why? Yeah.
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 And then what would bring me in? What would make me consider it?
Yep.
And I think what I think you'll extrapolate out from that, my guess is the curated experience is the way to get them into it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it, like glamping obviously is a bigger one, right?
Yep.
It's curated by default. But even something is like, I have a tent site set up for you and prepared. I've pitched the tent. I've got the comfortable sleeping bag. There's a mat under it to make you nice, right? Like there's a zippered screen to keep most of the bugs out.
Right.
You just have to come and just show up.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's funny you say that, because that is something we've started to market. Actually, we have a tent. We will set it up. I think the question is, how do we get more people to know about the opportunity? But I think there is something there personally. I think from a hospitality perspective, I think that sort of next level stuff, it just makes me excited to see who would be interested in taking part of that.
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity for the people who are willing to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And I say willing, but I don't want to back myself into like people watching the show saying, well, I'm willing, but like, what do you mean I'm not willing?
Mm-hmm.
Many people are willing, but many people have never had is impetus the right word, or incentive to actually need to do this as their property, which is eventually going to lead us into the economic conversation, right?
Right.
But we've had boomers who have been the backbone of the camping industry, and Gen X and millennials, I get stuff confused, and older millennials who have been basically the backbone of the camping industry for the better part of the last 60 years.
Mm-hmm.
Since 1960, whatever, when the first campground when the first KOA opened, which was a result of the Cuban Missile Crisis, by the way. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
It's actually not true. It's completely fake.
Okay.
But it's the Cuban Missile Crisis was the same year as the World Fair.
Okay.
And it was started because of the World Fair. But like Scott and I were having a conversation with AI, and I said, I bet if I repeat that enough times, people will start believing.
To believe it. All right. Well, I'm not going to repeat it. But
yeah, but it was the World Fair. So anyway, and those boomers, those generations have not changed what they have expected from a campground.
Yes, that
for years.
Yes.
And so there's never been this impetus of like, I need to look at new amenities or new experiences or new ways of thinking or new curated experiences for tents or like that. So
go
ahead.
That resonates with me because one of the conclusions I had walking away from my experience just before I bought the campground when I was on the road is that campgrounds, it was clear to me that the demographic of who was out there in like the spring of 2024 was maybe not who was camping 5 years before that. Because I had this image in my head that I was going to be on campgrounds with mostly boomers, people, and no disrespect to that, like people like my parents who I knew had been traveling south for years. And what surprised me was there were people same age as me, with families, without families, on their own, working remotely, just like I was. Like 50% of the people in campgrounds were, I would by mental math, sort of in the same life spaces I was in, which kind of shocked me. And then that made me wonder, what campgrounds offered was just what they'd always offered. It was just what was true. It's not necessarily what we wanted or what we needed from campgrounds. It's just what they'd always offered. And
it's the definition of a campground. A campground has mini golf. It has a swimming pool. It has a small grocery store. It has bathrooms and showers. It has basically that's it, right? What am I missing?
Cornhole. Yeah, I think that's it. Cornhole. Yeah. And like not great Wi-Fi and my favorite ones I went to had like bars and restaurants, which felt like new and exciting, right? Places where people could hang out and gather. But again, it was this working theory of like, I don't think this is actually what people want. It's just what they've always offered. And so where's this conversation about what the campground industry should be and what people who, are participating in it, who are, customers or guests of our resorts, like what do they want in a campground? Not just not compared to what they've seen in other campgrounds, but like blank slate, what could we create that I think appeals to what people need and want today? And I think that makes it more accessible to the next generation as well. That would be my working theory, which is, I obsess a lot about business model because I think there's a lot of opportunities that are unique to our campground. We're close to things, for example, we're 10 minutes from everything in Plattsburgh. And so, but it feels like you're still out, but you don't, sacrifice, the opportunity to go to a Target or a Walmart or whatever you need. It's 10 minutes from here, which is appealing. It certainly was to me when I was thinking about where do I want to plant roots and build a business. I didn't necessarily want to do it an hour from the nearest hardware store. But all that to say, like, I do think there's stuff that, we're going to try and we'll see if it works. But like a bar is definitely at the top of our list of like next additions to the property, because it's about, I think, creating spaces where people can gather. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to consider this just a campground. I think when I'm like most inspired, I talk about it like it's an outdoor hotel. And like the places like we're traveling, I think we offer certainly unique experiences because we're a campground. But how can we be a place that, whether you're tent camping, glamping, staying in an RV, where there's still these central experiences that people want or are looking for and need, that we can offer?
I think this is probably going to get me some hate email, but by saying this, right? I think you could make an interesting case for the following statement to be true. In many resort-style hotels, or even, I mean, heck, you could even take a upper-scale Holiday Inn, right? Mm-hmm. In many of those hotels, there are often more places to gather than there are in a campground, even though I never see anybody using them at a hotel.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
There are meeting rooms, there are lobbies, there are chairs outside the elevators, and we don't really have, like, sometimes we have pavilions and we have community fire pits.
Right. With like, for remote workers, do we have a great space where people can like set up a laptop and work. I mean, that is the direction we're moving. I can't say that we do right now today, but I think by the time we open next season, we certainly hope to. And that space will also be where we'll have a bar, and that ideally, if we're busy enough, we'll have a coffee shop in the morning as well. But modeling that, I think, after like what's a good hotel lobby have? That's what I want this to feel like when people walk into the space.
One of the places I was impressed by was not a campground, but I was down in the Keys, and this is just a recent impression,
Mhm.
right? We stayed at I'm trying to remember. I think it was Pines and Palms Resort. It was from a Michigan couple came and bought the property. It's one of the like an older, not really a motel, I guess a motel style, right? But like two
Mhm.
little cottages next to each other,
Sure.
and then they have like 10 of those, and it's right on the ocean, right on the
Right.
sand, right? In Isla Morada down there in Key West, and not big enough to where you need to have a restaurant or a store or
Yeah.
anything else like that. So like you just two things and you walk out and you're outside, right? So I guess it's a motel. Um, and they had a little food truck coffee shop there in the
Yes.
morning, and they had a food truck for lunch that we didn't get to eat at, right? Because we were out exploring, but was right there. Tiny little food trucks.
Yeah.
So in the morning, my girlfriend and I could just walk up. We could, or wake up, walk outside our room, like 3-minute walk around a couple other cottages, right? And we're at the coffee place, and they've got espressos and lattes and
Yeah.
everything else, right? And then there's little chairs out there that you could sit at if you wanted to. We went down to the beach and sat right by there, right?
Awesome. Yeah.
Because we're in Calgary and we don't have beaches here. Well, not real beaches anyway.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that's what you're talking about, right? I
Yeah.
think
Exactly that.
there's sometimes a gap of like, do we actually need a full restaurant? Maybe not.
Right.
But then do you just like lots of campgrounds will get on here and tell you they offer coffee. That's not the same thing as that
No,
food truck
okay.
experience.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and
Yeah.
it's not like you need a professional vendor. Like you could buy one of these food trucks for whatever they
Mhm.
cost, $20,000,
Yep.
$30,000, right?
Right.
Little tiny trailers, really. It doesn't even need to be an
Yeah.
actual
Use
moving
an old
truck.
camper. Yeah. Right.
And then you need to buy like a $1,000 latte machine
Right.
and probably get some kind of permitting, I would guess. Like
Yes.
it's probably harder than I'm describing it, right? But then just to have a staff member work it for 3 or 4
That's it.
hours a morning.
Yeah. The concept itself is not that challenging. It's just it's changing or like veering from sort of the norm, which is what I think makes it a little bit intimidating. But
Yeah.
there's opportunity there.
And I think it's just different. It's just thinking about what does the experience look like, and maybe that doesn't always appeal to everybody. Maybe it doesn't even appeal to you as the owner. Maybe it
Mhm.
doesn't appeal to me as the guy who has the podcast and is doing the marketing and whatever else, right? But maybe it appeals to someone somewhere who will share this with friends, who will come stay with you, who will put it
Yeah.
on social media, who whatever. I go downstairs and I look at like I have a hydroponic garden in my living room, right? Nice little tall vertical tower
Yeah.
or whatever that grows like 80 some plants, strawberries and tomatoes and stuff like that. And I'm thinking like if I owned a campground, I would just throw a couple of those things in the lobby. And
Mhm.
then when people check in, the people who want to talk to me anyway, because some people don't, right?
Yeah.
They could just take some parsley or basil or whatever they like lettuce and just like it's just free. Just take it.
Yeah.
Like, and I just think that like that doesn't monetarily make people maybe want to come to me and stay,
Right.
but it surely must enhance the percentage chance that I get a 4 or 5-star review from them in
Yeah.
some small way.
Yeah. It makes the
Or
park memorable too, right? It's like
yeah,
that's unlike anything I've seen somewhere else.
I
And
still remember the Traverse City KOA. It was one of the first KOAs we ever stayed at. Maybe not. I mean, that's not true, but like it was early on, right? 2011, 2012, right? When we were first starting the business. And we were just starting to get into organic stuff.
Mhm.
Like I had stopped drinking soda and lost like 80 pounds just by not drinking soda,
Sure.
right? And so I was starting to uncover this stuff and I was paying attention to like a little, this is so early in the United States. Like there was nothing, like I was born in the States, right?
Mhm.
There's nothing in the States in the grocery store except for like your organic section was like 80% gluten free. And that was
Yep.
what organic meant back then.
Yep.
So, but I remember like going to the Traverse City KOA and they had local organic tiny little hotel shampoos from a company in their cabin showers.
Yeah.
And that still sticks out to me. Like
Right.
I don't know why, like who cares? It's just a shampoo and conditioner. And it was directly related to, I know, my life and my perception and the fact that I was going organic or whatever else. But like whether it's local or whether it's organic or whatever it is, it's those little tiny things
Right.
are not going to impress everybody,
No,
are
right.
not going to make people choose you necessarily over somebody else. but they're going to make an impression.
That's right. Yeah, it's
And I
not
think
what
that's
you
what
would
we're after.
typically see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that gives me a lot to think about. Is that we're just kind of getting to this place now where I'm learning a lot about like the life cycle of an RV park, and the last 18 months, 2 years has been, whether I wanted it to be or not, the focus has been on infrastructure, getting our
Yeah.
water system, electrical, and septic really in a place where now we are like poised for growth and can scale. And I don't want people to stay here to worry about the things they count on. And so that's been the number one priority. But the stuff you're talking about is the stuff that I love kind of daydreaming about. It's like, what are the details that are going to make the biggest impact and impression on people? Because that's like, those things matter, right? Like a really
Yeah,
well
and it's the
manicured park
details,
matters.
right?
Yeah, it's all the
And I
details.
won't claim to be a professor of economics. I don't own a campground because I'm not brave enough to do it, right? I just sit here behind my little mic and do marketing and whatever else, and AI and all that kind of stuff, right? But like, I have to think there's some kind of business use case
Yeah.
for like, just let's pick something like towels,
Mm-hmm.
like in your cabin. Sure, I provide towels, but you provide the $3 ones from Walmart that are scratching and rub
Right.
your face.
Yes.
Now I get it. There's a counter argument, and again, I led with I don't know the economics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know your style of guest, and I recognize that people are sometimes slobs and will trash
Sure.
and ruin your towels and whatever else, right? But I wonder what the economics were if you actually studied it, and it would be harder to get this data because it's not clear, right? But of the here's a fluffy towel,
Yep.
it does that change in some small perceptible way the review scores or the perception or the
Yep.
willingness of people to share things on social media. And if
Yeah.
you take those towels combined with the soap, combined with the hydroponic garden, combined with the whatever you want to do, right? 60 other
And
things,
they build.
there's so little.
Yeah.
Does that actually go from 4 to 5 stars?
Yeah. I, we're willing to test that over here and see. I think that's the kind of, it's also the big question of like, what kind of business do I want to run? Like, what's my vision for something, and like, where am I willing to negotiate and where am I not? But I think that like what you're describing is aligned with how, we're trying to think as we get to the next chapter.
All right, let me give you a hard question.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, somebody drops $5 million into your bank account, doesn't want anything in return. What do you do at Shady Oaks?
I think I love that question. I've got I think a pretty solid like 3 to 5 year plan that still really resonates with me. It makes me like get moving in the morning. I think it's move faster.
Okay.
Would be not my number one answer. And in order to build uh, the experiences, I think running down that list, it's the bar that I mentioned before, and build out that space in a way it's more than a bar. It's like it helps build or create the experiences for people that we want people to have while they're here. It's a very much on brand themed, like vintage camper is the bar where people sit, like sitting at an old camper, and it's sort of on brand and aligned. So that central gathering space is like number one on the list. I think we have one glamping tent. I'd like to add 5 or 6 more. Again, like filling this vision of like this outdoor hotel. But I think our one tent has done really well, and there's data that says like more would do better, and so having more would bring more guests.
How would you design that? I don't want to stop your plan in the middle because I
Yeah.
want you to finish, but how would you design the glamping? Because we've gathered a lot of data. Like we put out a 2026 outdoor hospitality pricing report.
Yep.
We publish the OHPI, which is the Outdoor Hospitality Pricing Index, every month. And we know that the average, and I'm going to be off by a couple dollars, right? Because I don't have all this memorized. The average glamping accommodation inside of a campground goes for, I think, $158 a night. And the average standalone glamping property outside of a campground goes for $300 a night.
Yeah, interesting. And that is aligned. That's like what we're experiencing too. But I think the opportunity though is about, are you just adding a glamping tent to an existing campground, or I'm starting to think about the different sections of our business as like businesses within one big business,
Okay.
like separate businesses. And I think glamping is one of them, because they do take, a different brain space, or there's like a different, it's just very different. There's things that are certainly similar and they fit within the business, but then there are things that like require, in my limited experience, my current working theory is like we've got to think differently about the glamping experiences that people have, the ones that and what kind of experiences do we want people to have. It sort of supports my argument of we need more of them to create like a glamp ground within Shady Oaks, so that we can sort of leverage some scale. I think there's like, I'd invest in better bathrooms that are more aligned with like the resort feel that we want people to have, or that people might expect as part of a glamping experience. Ours aren't bad; they're renovated bathrooms, but we could do better. I think the other thing that I see at other the pure glamp grounds is like hot tubs as part of their accommodations. We
Mhm.
don't offer that, but I think that's certainly something that we would be interested in considering as we like really dive deep into glamping, and again trying to understand the experiences that people want, and like the ones we want people to create here. Um, and certainly there's some like quality things there too. Like if we're gonna, one glamping tent was sort of an experiment. Like how do we outfit it? How do we furnish it? How do we do all that? But like if we're gonna do 6 or 7 of them, it sort of changes the formula, and allows us to, I think differently potentially about it. So yeah, I don't know if that's a full answer to your question of like how do we distinguish it, but the way that I want to approach it is it's like we're offering, they'd all be in roughly the same area. There's like a village of these domes, which is it's why we chose the placement for the first tent that we did, so that we could expand around it in a section of campground that will be fairly private from the rest of the campground. But I think part of like, I don't want it to be totally separate. I want like glamping to still feel like they're part of the core experience of what it is to stay at Shady Oaks.
I think there are 10,000 different ways that you could make the experience different, right?
Yeah.
I think if you asked me to boil it down, and remember, I'm the guy with no experience, doesn't know how to campground, to take it with a grain of salt when it comes out of my mouth, right? I think if you boil it down to isolation, I think I think the difference between $158 a night average glamping site rate at a campground and $300 at a glamping resort is if you can make somebody come into, yes, they got to go through a campground to get there.
Yeah.
I think if you can make them, when they step into their site, forget everything else that's around them, I think you can get $300 a night. I think you can. And
Yeah.
I'll give you examples of that, right? It's maybe not the best example. I'm sure it's much nicer now. There's a resort or a company up here called Charmed Resorts in Alberta, and it's the guy who used to be he used to do Playground Masters on TLC. I think he was the host of the show, and like he designed playhouses for Steph Curry and all kinds of other stuff, right? And so he turned and he started building these Charmed glamping resorts that are based on like storybook characters and stuff, like all custom built, like in his own warehouse. It's so talented, right? So we went and stayed at one of his resorts, like, I don't know, 3-4 years ago now, something like that, when he was just kind of getting started. He only had, I think, one location.
Yeah.
But we went there, and he had organized them all in like a village, and it was really spaced out. But like you kind of stepped into under an arch that was like a storybook, right? And I'm sure it's way better now, right? Like he was just getting started, and it was beautiful, but it was like, it wasn't a complete village, but like it was organized in that way. And then you get to your accommodation and you could see your neighbor because he didn't have trees built yet and all that kind of stuff, right?
Right.
But your yard, at least our yard, was fenced in. So you could walk into like a fence.
Yeah, I like that.
And you had like, it was a little bit of privacy. And so there was a hot tub out back that was wood fired, but we could actually, like, we never used it because you could sit in the hot tub and your neighbors in the back were at their picnic table with a family reunion. And I was like, well, we don't want to do this in the hot tub. But the idea is there, right? Is isolation. Yeah. The other one was, I remember we went to Ireland last September, and we stayed at at his house, but he had a container home set up like down on the river, probably like, I want to say 180, 200 feet from his house.
Hmm.
It was down a winding path on the riverfront, and he had so many hedges there separating his house and his driveway. It was kind of down a little hill that, like, once you were checked in, you completely forgot this guy's house was
No
right
way.
there.
That's cool.
And so but I think that's so all that is pointing to what I'm saying is I think the difference is isolation.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that you are isolated, but that you feel
Private.
disconnected.
Yeah.
I think that's how you get the things. And I think that's easy to accomplish. I think that's a row of super tall hedges between sites
Yeah,
can be even
totally.
that simple, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm imagining them on our property. We could totally do that. The I guess I would have assumed that there's one thing that speaks to that gap is like how, and I think about this with our tent all the time. Like we don't, because we're not strictly a glamp ground. Like our website looks like a campground website.
Mhm.
Our booking platform is a campground management software. Like there are
Differences.
differences, yeah, and like if it feels more like a campground and less like a hotel than what I would want, right? And so that's something I've wondered is like, is that holding back our bookings? We're also booked. We're all, our tents and our RV rentals are also on Airbnb, and that does, for better or for worse, is where we get the majority of our bookings for those. They don't come through our platform. So,
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we define ourselves in the industry, how you guys define yourselves as campgrounds. We were just at the Florida Alabama conference. We pulled some data. I did a presentation at that conference in front of everybody, and we were talking about how the number one word that's used on Florida campgrounds homepages, and we went out, so we scraped 1,400 of these with an AI agent and looked at the stuff, right? Was community, which is
yeah,
often heard in our industry, right? Community,
yeah, it's
community,
all over
community,
our website. Yeah,
right? All over. But Florida especially because they're bigger, long-term, whatever else.
yep,
We looked at then 100 reviews that we had pulled in for almost every private campground in Florida, and none of the 5-star reviews talked about community.
yeah.
So you're defining it as community, but your guests aren't noticing it as community when they leave their positive reviews, which is a gap.
That's a huge gap. That's really helpful.
So that doesn't mean, I'm not necessarily saying that doesn't mean you should de-emphasize or emphasize community, but this isn't resonating with them like you think it is.
Right.
Or at least it's not resonating enough to impact their 5-star review of the good experience. And again, that was Florida specific, right? I can't tell you that extrapolates out to the rest of the country. We have that data sitting in a database, but I haven't pulled it and looked at it. But those kinds of little things, how you define yourself, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, how do you? Like, this is certainly a battle. Like what we're talking about is like a challenge right now. Of like, okay, we've got glamping tents and we're a campground. I think the other place where this like similar thought comes in or challenge is like, okay, we're a campground. We have seasonal camping, and we have for like overnight or transient.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the word transit, so we use overnight camping too, like short-term stays.
Yep.
But like those are also very different businesses. Like seasonal campers are looking often, in my experience, looking for something very different than what a short-term guest might be looking for. And I guess I'm curious if you were me, like trying to again define this business, that what I'm finding is it's way more complicated than complicated. It's pretty straightforward and pretty simple, but there's complexity here of like appealing to the different types and defining the different types of the business to move in the direction. I think, fortunately, I think we're getting it right, but I couldn't tell you exactly how we're doing it is not replicable, and I don't even think it's scalable as we get more established, right? We're like, people like the story of renovating the campground, and that's certainly been the biggest appeal.
So your question is?
Good point. My question is like, how would you think about the different, like, I guess work streams, or really it's not, it's more like these are the different offerings that we have. How would you market the business, or how would you, if you were in my seat, how would you think about like defining and maybe marketing? It doesn't feel like a strong enough word, but differentiating maybe is a better word.
It's interesting because we've actually been doing this for some of our clients. We have these things called, and it's not a pitch for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can replicate all this if you want to on your own. we have these things called master SEO plans, and we've been doing them for a couple of years for people to get people prepared for where we think AI is going with discovery and how search is changing, and which is a whole nother thing. Google blew up and killed all the blue links yesterday at their I/O conference, so nobody's really prepared for that. But so we don't have time to discuss that today. But I think what we've been looking at as part of those master SEO plans is we think campground websites expand from 10 pages to 30 or 50 pages. That doesn't mean marketing copy. It doesn't mean blog posts. It means more factual information in your website that AI agents can know about your website and thus then serve that information through voice or Alexa or ChatGPT or whatever else it is to the person, right? And so as part of that, we've been looking at what is the ideal customer profile for a campground and having like a really smart, expensive AI model go through and like, how does AI see my campground right now as it is, right?
Yeah.
What is the ideal customer profile for that? Then break it down into like 5 to 6 different buyer personas.
Sure.
Is it the single mom with kids? Is it the retiree traveling across the country? Whatever it is, right? And then you can actually, if you know how to prompt AI right and you're using these really smart thinking models, you can say, okay, now act as a retired couple who's 66 years old traveling across the country. What would make you buy if you saw it? And it will narrow its corpus of knowledge down to acting like that 66-year-old couple. And it will tell you like what would resonate with me in Google Ads copy and email marketing copy and website copy and whatever else. And then we'll build landing pages for traveling nurses or pipeline workers or whatever else, right? And then we'll take a conglomerate of that and we'll make the homepage like an appealing to all those different types of people in some small way.
That's interesting.
So I think that's the best way you can do it from a marketing website standpoint. I think AI is going to help a lot.
Okay.
Because AI is just getting to this point now where you can start to, it remembers things about you. It's done that for a while.
Yep.
In Google, you're going to be able to already do, like they have a thing called personal intelligence where you can connect your Gmail and your photos and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
The search box they introduced yesterday, you can upload photos and you can say, find me address that's similar to this, right? It's changing the whole search experience. But as it becomes more personal, it's going to be connected to your calendar and your YouTube history and your reviews and everything you've ever done. And everybody will give it that access. Everybody likes to say we want privacy. No, you don't. You want convenience.
Yeah, right. Yep.
And so as it knows more and more about you, the data in return it's going to get, the answer it's going to give you when you search for campground near Plattsburgh, New York is going to be different for every single person on the planet.
Yeah, right.
So I think it gets to a point where it knows that your person who's searching is a long-term or a short-term or a glamper or whatever. And if you have the content on your website to appeal to that specific individual person to where AI knows you have the glamping tent specifically in a segmented area that's isolated, that's whatever, there's enough facts about them, it'll just give that information to that person because that's all they need to know. And I think that helps you.
Yeah.
I think that's the answer to your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope it is. Anyway.
Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you.
So, all right. We got a couple more minutes left. That was a pretty good episode for just the two of us. Yeah.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Final thoughts? Anything you want to share about your park or your plans or anything we've talked about?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about Plattsburgh, the Adirondacks, upstate New York. Would love to have folks visit this summer.
I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to do a live check-in. For those of you guys weren't watching, like before we started the show, Jon was like, I might get a live check-in. I might have to leave, like if that happens. I was like, just take the camera with you. We can do a live check-in with us. But yeah, thank you for being here, Jon. I appreciate it. Shady Oaks, like you're looking like you're having a good season. Memorial Day is doing pretty good for you.
Yeah, we're waiting. There's definitely going to be some late bookings. That's sort of the nature of the season as people wait out the weather. But we're a little over 50% booked right now. So excited about the weekend.
Awesome. Well, best of luck to you. I hope you have a great summer season. Thank you for being here again, Jon. Appreciate everybody for joining us for another episode of MC Fireside Chats. If you're not sick and tired of hearing from me in about an hour or so, I'm used to being a couple minutes late. In about an hour or so, I will be live on Outwired with Scott Barr. We're going to be talking about data, AI, some of the new Google search stuff that's come out. And if not, we will see you next week on another episode of MC Fireside Chats. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you. Thanks, Jon.
Hey, thank you.